Hi, I'm Any New Province, and this is Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefit of net decking in Pauper. This week we're playing Affinity, one of the oldest boogeymen in the Pauper metagame. Magic the Gathering Online user Alwaysface used it to win the Pauper Challenge this weekend, and hopefully we can use it to win a league. Before I tell you what these robots are trying to do, I just want to remind you that you can like the video and subscribe to the channel down below. I'd really appreciate it. It lets me know that you're enjoying everything, and it really encourages me to keep going and making great Pauper content. Affinity works on a couple different axes. First, it tries to get as many artifacts down on the battlefield as possible. Then it does things like cast 4/4s on the cheap, draw a lot of cards, disrupt your opponent's board, or even just sacrifice a ton of the artifacts to an ATOG and then fling it at their face for the win. I'm going to explain the threats of this deck first. I feel like that'll really give you an idea for why this deck is so scary to go up against, and it'll also show why it's worth it to run so many artifacts. First, we have Mere Enforcer. It's a 7-mana 4/4, which seems kind of slow and expensive, but it has Affinity for Artifacts. Affinity for Artifacts says, this spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. That means there'll be times where we're paying as little as 2 or a single mana for this card. Sometimes it even gets cast for free, and free 4/4s are something you should definitely be afraid of. The other Affinity for Artifact creature we are playing is Frogmite, which is a 4-mana 2/2. It's a lot less intimidating than the Mere Enforcer, but we can also start casting this for free a lot earlier. It'll up the artifact count and make the rest of our threats a lot easier to cast later on in the game. The last creature we're getting a true discount on is Gearseeker Serpent, which has kind of a pseudo Affinity for Artifacts ability. It says Gearseeker Serpent costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. You can also pay 5 and a blue to make Gearseeker Serpent unblockable for a turn. That means at cheapest this will come down as blue, and if you have 6 mana you can just start chipping in for 5 damage without your opponent being able to do much about it. Our last 2 threats only cost 2 mana, so we're not looking to get much of a discount on them in the first place. They do, however, care about artifacts, so of course they're a good fit in this deck. We have 4 Carapace Forgers. Carapace Forger says Metalcraft. Carapace Forger gets +2/+2 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. We also have ATOG, which says sacrifice an artifact, ATOG gets +2/+2 until end of turn. You can see how these creatures are already at a good rate. Usually they're 4/4s, ATOG can get even bigger than that. As a matter of fact, ATOG can get so big that it serves as an alternate win condition without even attacking. I'll get to that in just a moment. First, I want to talk about Thoughtcast, the way that this deck generates most of its card advantage. Thoughtcast has Affinity for Artifacts, and it says draw 2 cards. We get a discount off this card draw spell from having a lot of artifacts in our deck as well, and because this deck spews at its hand much like Modern Affinity, we need to reload as quickly as possible. That's why we're running 4 of these. Another source of card advantage that this deck has is Prophetic Prism. Prophetic Prism says, when Prophetic Prism enters the battlefield, draw a card. You can pay 1 mana and tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. This deck sometimes has trouble with its colors because it's technically 3, even though it just runs a bunch of artifacts. So it runs Prophetic Prisms, Springleaf Drums, which says, tap an untapped creature you control, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and Chromatic Stars. Chromatic Star also cantrips similar to the Prophetic Prism when we're digging for the answer that we need, or just another threat to commit to the board. Another kind of interesting inclusion in this deck over other Affinity lists is the one of Ichor Wellspring. It does draw you cards, and when you sacrifice it to ATOG, it'll draw you another card, but it doesn't fix your mana like the other artifacts. I'm really interested to see how this will play out. This deck really does want to beat down with its 4/4 threats and win the game quickly, but it does still run a sparse interaction package. It has Galvanic Blast. Galvanic Blast reads, Galvanic Blast deals 2 damage to target creature or player. It has Metalcraft, which says, Galvanic Blast deals 4 damage to that creature or player instead if you control 3 or more artifacts. It's also running 1 Dispel, which says counter target instant spell. The other kind of interactive spells do more than just that, so I've kind of grouped them on their own. Those other spells are Teamer Battle Rage, which says target creature gains double strike until end of turn. It has Ferocious that says that creature also gains trample until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. We've got a lot of those creatures, so Ferocious is usually turned on. We're trying to give ATOG double strike with this. We sacrifice a bunch of artifacts to it, give it trample and double strike, and usually you can attack your opponent for 20 as early as turn 3 or 4. We also have 1 Fling, which lets us fling an ATOG that has 20 power at our opponent for lethal. This is good if the board is stalled up, or if our opponent is running a bunch of fogs and we just can't get those points of damage in. Finally, we have Flare Husk, which doesn't do a whole lot on its own, but in this deck, it's just another cog that keeps the robot wheel turning. Flare Husk says, Living Weapon. When this equipment enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 black germ creature token, then attach this to it. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. That's what keeps the germ creature from dying. Flare Husk is great because it can get in the way of a lethal threat from a hyper-aggressive deck. We can tap it for mana using a Springleaf Drum. We can equip it up to one of our creatures to go over our opponent, and it gets our Affinity for Artifact count up. It really does it all in this deck. Okay, let's have a look at this mana base. We have 4 Darksteel Citadels, which are indestructible and generate colorless mana. Importantly, they're artifacts like the rest of our mana base. It's good that it's indestructible because most of the time our opponents will sideboard in their Gorilla Shamans to blow up all of our artifacts. We also have 4 Great Furnace. These are the mountain equivalent of artifact lands, 4 Seat of the Synods, your artifact islands, and 4 Tree of Tales, your artifact forests. Alright, let's check out this sideboard. Buckle up because there's a lot of wild stuff in here. We've got 1 Journey to Nowhere, which is a catch-all removal spell using white mana. We have no white mana in our mana base, but we can cast this off of Springleaf Drums and Prophetic Prisms. Gonna be kind of interesting siding this one in. We have 1 Standard Bearer for catching all of our opponent's enchantment and pump spells. We have 1 Relic of Progenitus to shut down those fogs out of Tron decks. We have 2 Hydroblasts, probably to counter burn spells or to kill opposing ATOGs. We have a Serene Heart that destroys all auras. They're probably attached to Boggles, so we gotta get rid of them. We have 2 Electricaries for killing all of the X1s. We have 2 of our own Gorilla Shamans for the mirror. We have 2 Crack Clan Shaman for another kind of board wipe effect, maybe if we have to go up against Stompy and sack a couple of artifacts to wipe the board. And we also have 3 Pyroblasts. I'm assuming these are for creating a kind of counter war with an opponent who's counter heavy. And there it is, Affinity. It was probably pretty scary running into Always Face, who was playing this deck in the challenge, and I hope this deck is as fun to play as it is scary. We're taking this deck live into a league on Monday night at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince. We're there every Monday night playing competitive decks in Pauper League, so come on by, give me some advice on how to play the deck, and hopefully help me win. Just a reminder that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd really appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you're enjoying everything, and it encourages me to keep going and making great Pauper content. That's the deck tech for this week for Net Benefits. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you on Monday night for some live matches.